I'm discussing paper today, the various type of watercolor paper that I use for my paintings. Most of the paintings I work on are either on 300 weight watercolor paper, cold press, surface, and I'll discuss the surface in a minute. The other weight of paper I use for larger pieces would be 140 weight paper, which comes in a roll. And the surface I prefer working on is either rough or cold press. There are three surfaces that a watercolorist can use. One of them is called hot press, which is very smooth. The other is cold press, which is a medium surface. And then the other is rough, which is a rougher textured surface. And the surface I'm working on right now with this painting is cold press 300 weight watercolor paper, and it's my favorite surface to work on. It is fairly heavyweight and doesn't warp. It doesn't require any preparation. Then the difference between the cold press surface and the rough would be, in this demonstration here shows you a rough surface. This is a cold press surface. You can't see as much texture. And the way it works with paint is the paint that goes over the surface shows little glints of white showing through. And with watercolor, you want to maintain the white as impeccably as possible. You don't add any white to the painting. You utilize the white in the paper for all of the white areas in the painting, or the lighter colored areas in the painting would require just a little bit of paint. The 140 weight paper requires stretching. I usually stretch it over a board using glue to adhere the paper to the board, and then I weight it down as it dries.
Didn't you used to paint on board?
Years ago I used watercolor board, which isn't being manufactured anymore to the standard that I expected it to be years ago. They've had problems with their glue, they've changed papers, so I was faced with the dilemma of making my own board, which I did. And I have since manufactured my own board utilizing Masonite and Yes glue, which is a brand name, YES. It's an archival glue that holds the watercolor paper to the board. In some cases I'll do 2 layers of paper under the watercolor paper. I'll put one layer and then glue another layer over that. That gives me a good absorbable surface to work on, and in a way doubles the thickness of the paper. But I usually only will do that for very large paintings, since the 300 weight is limited to 40 by 60 inches. So if I go bigger than 40 inches, say 52 inches would be the widest I could go with a rolled watercolor paper of 140 weight. That comes in rolls 52 inches by 10 yards, so that gives me the ability to do a large watercolor painting. It's more work to process this surface. That is, it's a large piece of paper being glued to a piece of Masonite, and it takes up space to process it, and you have to weight it down with multiple weights. So it's ends up with a pretty good surface to work on that doesn't warp, requires gluing bracing on the back of the board, and again has to be weighted down while it dries. But you finish with a material that's, shall I show it? You finish up with a surface that's very solid and doesn't warp. It maintains a nice flat surface, which is highly desirable for a watercolor painting.
Thank you very much, Jackie. See you again.